The wind tore low across the prairie, rasping over dry stalks of blue stem and dusting the horizon with a haze of soil that hadn't felt rain in weeks. The sun hung like a judgment above the flat world, hot and high, and the road, if it could be called such, was nothing but a suggestion of ruts leading nowhere with any kind of kindness. She moved slowly, every step a choice, every breath a reckoning. Her coat, once a shade of blue, was now the color of earth and fatigue. Beneath it, her dress clung in stiff folds, sweat welded to her back, her legs rubbed raw where fabric met skin, her boots were split at the sides. She had not eaten since the morning before, save for a half-rotten apple taken from a crooked barrel behind the mercantile 2 towns back. A buzzard wheeled above her, then another. She did not look up. A sack hung from her shoulder, canvas and leather stitched, heavy with what little mattered. A child's worn bonnet, a hairbrush with half its bristles missing. A tin of lard, nearly empty. A folded paper with names on it 3, written in a hand she had once loved. She told them, "Be strong." She told them with her lips pressed to their foreheads as their eyes pleaded with her to stay. But there had been no staying, not where he drank and roared and turned soft evenings into bruised mornings, not where her oldest had started to flinch at footsteps and the youngest whispered, "Is it my fault, Mama?" So she had walked, and she was still walking. The land stretched ahead, shimmering with heat. No trees, no towns, no sign of water. Just fences long since fallen, and bones of cattle whitened by sun. A groan worked up from her chest, neither cry nor word, but something buried deeper, and she stumbled to her knees. The dirt clung to her like guilt. Her breath came thin. She let her eyes close. When they opened, she wasn't alone. A figure sat quiet on a rise about 50 paces ahead, near where the road dipped into a shallow gully. His hat shaded his face, but he didn't move, didn't speak. A horse stood nearby, reins looped over a mesquite branch. She stared. Then, like wind through brittle grass, fear moved in her. She reached for the sack, fingers closing over the thin handle of a kitchen knife, rusted but still sharp. Her hands trembled. He stood. She braced, but he made no approach, just raised one arm, slowly open palm, and called out, voice low, steady, "You look like you need water." She didn't answer. He knelt then on both knees, right there in the road, dust curling around him, and took off his hat. "You don't have to be strong anymore," he said. And in that moment, the wind stilled. She stood with the knife still in her hand, unsure whether to run or trust. The sun pressed down harder now, and the heat was a weight, but his voice had not cracked. There was no pity in it, no threat either. Just something still. "Water," he repeated, pointing to the canteen beside his boot. "And shade." She stepped forward, 1 foot, then another. He waited. The water tasted like tin and river rock and salvation. She drank slow at first, then desperate, the way a woman drinks who has not trusted her own thirst in a long time. It spilled down her chin, wetting the dust at her collarbone. And still he said nothing, only turned away politely, as if modesty lived even here, on a dirt path between nowhere and whatever might come next. He was younger than she expected when she looked at him, proper lines around the eyes. Sure, but not so many. Brown hair gone, sun-touched. A scar that split one brow, healed smooth, like a creek bed gone dry. His shirt was worn thin at the shoulders, a blue work shirt, buttoned halfway. His hands were calloused. She noticed these things the way a woman does when her life has depended on reading men quickly, thoroughly, quietly. "Name's Cal," he said, after a long spell of quiet. She didn't offer hers. He didn't press. They sat beneath the mesquite. His horse nosed at the brittle grass, tail flicking. A breeze came and went. The silence was a third presence, neither cruel nor kind, but expectant. He broke it. "There's a place 'bout 5 miles north. Old station. My brother used to keep cattle near there. Shed's still good. Got a pump if it's not gone dry." She nodded once. Her hand was still curled around the handle of the sack. "Could ride?" he offered. "But I only got the one. I'll walk." He looked at her boots, split and caked. Didn't argue. They walked at a slow pace. The sun began to lower, less a tyrant now, more a tired overseer. The land widened as they moved, like it was unfolding only as far as her hope allowed. Wind carried the smell of sage and dry manure. She did not ask questions. But Cal did not fill the silence with stories either. Not until dusk painted the sky in long bruises and the shed came into view, nestled beside a crumbling windmill. "My ma built that," he said, tilting his chin at the structure. "With her own hands. Pa was sick that year, and she ran the herd on her own." She glanced at him. She used to say, "Don't wait to be rescued." The pump creaked, groaned, then sputtered. She watched him work the handle until the first spit of water came. He caught it in a basin, washed his hands before offering her a cup. There was one cot inside the shed. He spread a bedroll by the door for himself, left the cot for her without asking. As the stars began to pierce through the ink of night, she sat on the edge of the cot and stared at her hands. They were cracked at the knuckles. A blister had broken on her palm, but they were hers, and they had carried her this far. "Your children," Cal said from the doorway, voice soft. "They got names?" She stiffened. "Yes." He nodded, waited. She let the silence stretch. Then, like a trickle from a wound, she answered. "Ruth, Mabel, Thomas. You left for them." She nodded again, barely perceptible. "Then they're lucky," he said, "even if they don't know it yet." She lay down without reply, her back to the wall, the stars her ceiling. Sleep did not come easily, but when it did, it came without nightmares. And for the first time in many nights, she did not dream of running. Dawn broke pale and cold, a silence more fragile than peaceful stretching across the high plain. Frost clung to the brittle edges of the grass, a shimmer of ice against sun-bleached gold. The wind had shifted overnight, carrying the sharp scent of wood smoke from somewhere far off, or maybe just memory. She stirred, under the worn quilt Cal had tossed over her during the night, her breath clouding in the cool air. Her body ached not from sleep, but from the sudden presence of safety. It was a different kind of weight. Outside, the windmill creaked, a lonely sentinel in the morning quiet. She found him already outside, feeding the horse. He didn't speak when she stepped out, only handed her a tin cup with warm coffee. It was bitter and strong, and she drank it like she meant to prove something. "I got to head out today," he said after a time. "North Pasture's got a break in the fence." She nodded. "You could come if you want." He said it without looking at her, as if the offer itself were too delicate to meet the eye. She hesitated, then set the cup down on the fence post. They rode double, her behind him, arms loose at first, then firmer as the horse picked up its gait. The land opened around them, wide and quiet and so old it seemed like nothing had ever truly changed. She watched the earth pass beneath them, the rust-colored rocks, the sudden dips where jackrabbits scattered, the hawks floating above like they'd seen everything and stopped caring. At the break in the fence, Cal dismounted, tied the reins, and began his work. She stood back at first, watching the measured way he handled the wire, the way he moved like the land belonged to him and he to it. But then she stepped forward, took the second set of pliers without asking, and knelt beside him. "Used to mend windows," she said. "Before." He looked up. "My husband wasn't much for fixing things. Said that's what wives were for." He nodded, didn't smile. She twisted the wire, arms trembling. Her palms split open anew. But she didn't stop. He didn't stop her. By the time they finished, the sun had lifted higher, and her back ached, but the fence stood whole again. They sat on a rock under a lone cottonwood, splitting a piece of jerky and a crust of bread. He pointed toward the distant hills. "That ridge, my grandfather came over that on foot. Said he was running from something. Or maybe toward it. Never did say." "Most men don't," she murmured. He took a breath. He built the first cabin with his bare hands, lost 2 fingers to frostbite one winter, buried a wife and 2 sons before he turned 30. But he stayed, planted roots so deep they're still holding my family here. She chewed slowly, listening. "I stayed after my brother died," he continued. "Tried ranching alone. It don't always work. But the land don't lie. It'll break you clean or keep you honest." She looked out over the open range. "It's the first place that hasn't asked me to shrink." That quiet settled between them again, not awkward, not searching, just there, like a creek running between 2 stones. And though they did not speak of feelings or futures, something had shifted, not declared, but known. That night, She did not sleep in the shed. They sat outside instead, wrapped in blankets and silence. Stars spilled like salt across the sky. Coyotes sang far off, a lullaby for the forgotten. When she leaned her head against his shoulder, he did not move. When he reached up and rested a hand lightly on hers, neither of them said a word. A late autumn storm rolled in on the third week, slow and deliberate, the kind that did not rage but swallowed. The clouds came low, heavy with rain they never gave, and the sky held a yellowed stillness that made the air feel too close. Cal watched it from the ridge, one boot on a fence post, the other rooted in mud. He hadn't said much that morning. Neither had she. She was mending shirts in the lean-to behind the shed, her stitches steady, the needle clutched between cracked fingers. The rhythm helped, made silence something she could live inside. But the storm coiled in her chest too, matching the one outside, some sense that the stillness would not last. And then it didn't. It started with the clatter of hooves, too many to be wild. She looked up as a man on a red gelding rounded the far path. Another behind him, then one more. 3 riders, no smiles. Dust on their coats, law or trouble or both. Cal was already at the gate when they arrived. His stance didn't shift, but his jaw tightened. "Afternoon," said the first, a man in a bowler hat that didn't match his boots. "Looking for a woman, brunette, fled from Fairchild County with 3 children. Might be headed toward territory line." She froze. The shirts slipped from her lap. "You a ranger?" Cal asked. "Private concern," the man answered. "Her husband wants her home." Cal stared at him long and long. "And what if she don't want to be found?" "That ain't your concern." "It is if she's here." The man's eyes narrowed. "You hiding her?" "I said if." They dismounted then. 2 spread wide. The third stayed near the gate. One began walking toward the shed. She stood and stepped out from the lean-to before Cal could stop her. Her voice was steady. "You can tell him I'm not his anymore. And if he steps foot on this land, he'll find out what it means to raise a hand in a place that don't tolerate cowards." The man in the bowler tilted his head. "That a threat?" "It's a fact." She had no weapon, only her hands and the raw, brittle truth of her voice. But something in her eyes made the second man pause. Cal stepped forward then, calm as still water. "This land's deeded to me. You got no claim here, so unless you brought a judge, I suggest you ride back the way you came." A long moment passed. The wind picked up, tugged at coat hems, and stirred the dust. The man in the bowler studied them both, then spat in the dirt. "He'll come himself." Cal nodded once. "Let him." They rode off in silence, the sound of hooves fading like old thunder. She turned to Cal. Her hands shook, but she didn't hide them. "It can't go back. You won't. You believe me?" He looked at her then, not with pity, but with something steadier. "I seen the way you work, the way you stand. You're not running anymore. You're choosing." She exhaled, and it felt like something long held finally letting go. That night, she found a place on the ridge where the grass grew soft, where Cal had once laid fence. She planted the bonnet there, the one her youngest had outgrown. A marker, not of death, but of crossing. And when he found her there, she let him hold her, not like something broken, but like something worth building with. Winter came early. The first snow was thin, scattered, soft enough to melt on contact with the earth, but it whispered of what was coming. The wind no longer played it cut. Trees stood bare and solemn. Even the land seemed to hold its breath. They had moved into the cabin by then, the one Cal's grandfather had built. The walls were thick-hewn pine, the windows patched with oilcloth and stubborn will. A wood-burning stove hissed in the corner like a sleeping animal, and the smell of smoke wove through every beam and rafter. She had made it a home, hung up the children's drawings from her pack, stitched curtains from old flour sacks, laid blankets she'd salvaged from the station house across the bed, one layer at a time, each one a memory, a promise. Cal built a table with his own hands, told her stories about his mother as he sanded the planks smooth, about how she never said, "I love you," but always packed extra biscuits when she thought he hadn't eaten. He told her how his brother used to race cattle in the spring, bareback, drunk on joy, and how quiet the ranch had become after the fever took him. "I never thought of leaving," he said one night, voice quiet, head bowed beside her. "Even when it all felt hollow, "And now?" she asked. He looked at her then, eyes tired but full. "Now I think maybe it was waiting. For someone who could live in the silence and not fear it." She didn't reply, but she reached across the table, touched his hand with hers, and left it there. They settled into rhythm. Days passed in the slow, satisfying way of honest work. She rose early, gathered eggs, chopped kindling, salted meat. He rode the line, repaired what winter tried to tear down. Evenings were warm, even if the nights were brutal. They shared bread and stories and a bed neither of them had expected. But not all storms come with thunder. The letter came in mid-January, bundled with the last of the supply deliveries. It bore no seal, just her name, spelled wrong the way only he had ever spelled it. Inside, 4 sentences. "I'm coming. You're mine. The law won't stop me. The children belong to me." She read it once, folded it back, laid it on the table without a word. Cal read it, jaw working slow. "We could go," he said. She shook her head. "We'd run forever. Then we stand." She met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "I'm tired of running. I want something to hold, something that don't vanish." He nodded. There was no fear in his eyes, only fire. They spent the next day fortifying. Cal nailed fresh boards across the lowest windows. She set aside the shotgun and cleaned it in silence. By nightfall, the sky had gone black with snow, and the house stood firm against the wind. He found her by the hearth, holding the bonnet again. Her fingers traced its worn seams, her lips barely moving. "I don't want them to see him again," she whispered. "They won't." "What if?" He knelt before her, hands resting gently on her knees. "You told them to be strong, but maybe what they need is to see you safe, happy, loved." She closed her eyes. "You don't have to be strong anymore," he said, and something in her cracked not a break, but an opening. She leaned forward, pressed her forehead to his. For once, she allowed herself to be held, not because she needed saving, but because she finally believed she was worth staying for. The snow didn't stop for 2 days. It came relentless and soundless, blanketing the world in hush. Trees bent under its weight, fence posts vanished, and the sky lost its color. They waited inside the cabin, breath misting in the cold spaces between walls, hearts caught somewhere between calm and vigilance. Then came the sound, distant, dull at first, hooves muffled by snow, then sharper, deliberate, approaching. She rose slowly, her hand steady as she crossed the room. She did not wear fear anymore. It had fallen from her like old skin. She wore resolve now, like a second coat. Cal stood at the window, shotgun in hand, eyes narrowed against the white. One rider, not 3, not 5, just one. He stopped 30 yards out, dismounted, and stood in the snow. No words. Just a stillness that stank of control, of assumption, of ownership. Her breath caught, not from fear, from memory. He had not changed. Still broad in the shoulders. Still that same coat, brown and cracked, patched at the elbow. Still the look in his eyes that said, "You are mine whether you say so or not." Cal stepped out before she could. Boots sank in snow up to the shin. The door creaked as it shut behind him, and the wind pulled at his coat like hands. She watched through the glass, her breath fogging the pain. The man spoke first, loud enough to carry. "She's my wife." Cal didn't move. "Not anymore." "You think you can keep her? Think this little patch of dirt's gonna save you?" "I think she's already saved herself." The man laughed then, bitter and sharp. "She's weak. Always was." That was when she stepped outside. The cold hit her like a slap, but she walked through it, shoulders square, bonnet still in her hand like a banner. She came to stand beside Cal, did not reach for him, did not need to. Her voice was clear. "You will not take me," he sneered. "You think this backwoods life, this man makes you something new?" "No," she said, "but I do." The silence after those words was deep. "You lay hands on me again, and I'll put you in the ground." The wind howled like it agreed. Cal raised the shotgun then, slow and certain. "You heard her." The man looked between them, eyes cold, flicking with disbelief. Then he spat at the snow, turned, and mounted his horse. He did not ride fast away. He rode slow, as if the truth behind him stung more than a bullet ever could. They watched until he vanished. Only when the wind settled again did she let the air out of her lungs. She leaned against Cal, not out of weakness, but relief. He wrapped one arm around her shoulder. The other still held the shotgun. Later, when they went back inside, she laid the bonnet back in its box, not as a shrine, but as a keepsake. A thread from the past, not a chain. That night, Cal built a fire higher than he ever had. They sat on the floor near it, cross-legged like children. She told him about the first time she'd held Ruth, how small she had been, how loud. She told him about Mabel's laugh, and the way Thomas used to sing to the chickens like they were kin. He listened, didn't interrupt. Later, when she reached for his hand, she whispered, "I'm not lost anymore." His grip tightened. "You're home." And in the firelight, as the wind died outside, the world finally felt quiet in the right way. Spring came slow, coaxed from the frozen ground by sunlight that dared a little more each day. The snow melted in patches, leaving behind mud and the skeletal remains of things that had not survived the cold. But beneath it all, beneath the ruin and rot, new green began to show. First in shy shoots at the base of the cottonwoods, then in brave clusters of prairie flowers that bloomed like defiance. She worked the garden with her sleeves rolled high, hands buried in soil that stuck to her skin like belonging. The earth was stubborn, but not cruel. It would yield if you treated it right. She planted carrots and turnips first, hardy things. Things that could take a little hardship and still give back. Cal repaired the barn roof while she hoed rows, his whistle drifting across the field between hammer strikes. He didn't speak often while he worked, neither did she. But the silence between them had changed. It was no longer a wall, it was a thread. Something they both held. One morning, he came down from the ridge carrying a sack. Inside was a carving he'd made, a small horse, rough but beautiful, with her name etched underneath. "I was never good at saying things plain," he said, brushing the sawdust from his hands. She ran her fingers across the grain. "You don't need to be." They built more together. Fenced the east pasture. Painted the cabin door a faded blue that matched the thread she'd used to patch his shirt. They fixed the second room too, the one that had sat empty. He'd started calling it the girls' room. She hadn't corrected him. Letters came from a friend in town, a woman she had trusted once, years back. She wrote of the children often. Ruth had started singing in church. Mabel was quick with numbers. Thomas still asked for her at night. Her heart twisted when she read those lines, but it no longer felt like drowning, just tender. Then came the day Cal asked. They were planting corn then, rows long and clean. The sky stretched endless and bright above them. He didn't kneel, didn't offer a ring, just spoke quiet, the way he always did. "I want to grow old with you. I want to raise your kids like they're mine. I want to build something that don't break when the wind comes." She looked at him, dirt under his nails, sunburn across his neck, love etched in every line of his face. "Yes," she said. And it was not the kind of yes that trembled. It was the kind that takes root and grows. They married in June under the cottonwood. No crowd, no preacher, just two hands clasped and a promise spoken into wind. She wore a dress stitched from what scraps she had. He wore the same shirt he'd worn the first day she met him, patched again at the shoulder. They traded vows like old coins, well worn, valuable because they had survived. Afterward, she hung the bonnet on the wall beside the window, not as a reminder of pain but of endurance. Later that summer, she wrote a letter of her own, sent it to the town clerk. It read, "My children will return home at the end of harvest. Their mother is ready now. The door is open. The land is good, and love lives here." She signed it with her full name, the new one, the one she chose. As the sun set behind the hills that night, casting the land in gold and shadow, she stood on the porch with one hand resting over her belly. Cal came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "We'll build the cradle after supper," he said, voice low. She nodded, leaned back into it. The land stretched out before them, open, waiting, alive. And this time, she was not afraid.